And we're rolling.
We're continents apart, so.
Acton and George are not in George's living room anymore.
No, we are not. I'm in my bedroom, and where are you, George?
I'm in the kitchen of an apartment in Karlsruhe, Germany, which is a university town in the Baden-Württemberg region of Germany. It's the southwest, close to the border with France.
And you guys went to Alsace-Lorraine, right?
We went to Strasbourg in Alsace, and yesterday, in fact, we went to the Maginot Line, to like one of the. Do you know what the Maginot Line is?
The name is familiar. I'm embarrassed. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
It's this series of like 100 something underground fortresses that the French built after World War One, but like significantly after World War One. Like it was built between like 1930 and 1935 or six. And we went to one of them. Right. And I remember learning about the Maginot Line mostly because the famous thing about the Maginot Line is they basically did it all up and down the border of France with Germany. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do it in Belgium, or at least they had like very light, there's much lighter fortifications in Belgium. And when Hitler invaded France, he just like walked around the Maginot Line.
That's right. He just went through Belgium and boop, come around the other side.
Because it just proves that, you know, you're always planning against the last war. You know what I mean? Because they assumed it would be like, yeah. They assumed it would be like World War One Redux, but of course it was something totally different. So I knew what they were, like a series of forts, but like I had no idea how immense it was. This thing is huge. It's like an underground city, essentially.
Oh my word!
And the top is like, it has like, a gun tower and stuff to like fight from it. It's like a weapon. It's like a giant weapon.
Underground.
Well, the weapons fire above ground from the little turret, but like everyone lives underground in this giant. It was.
It's like the ultimate trench, basically. It's like they took the idea of trench from World War One.
They took this idea of like, guarding your borders, guarding your territory, preventing invasion, and it all went from there. But filed under the 20th century really sucked. I mean, just the amount of money, like forget, like, of course, the statistics about how many people were killed in both the major wars, right? Just the amount of resources that were spent. They built like 100 and something of these, just the French, and other countries were doing this too. It's like an underground city. It's like miles of these tunnels. It had electricity, it had phones, it had this whole like activated charcoal air filtration system. It had it had everything that you would have if you were living underground. A hospital, an operation room, a dentist, a barber. There was this one hallway where they could convert it. They could put these like planks to create like a risers and so they could do like a theater. They would have mass in there. I mean, it was like an underground city.
Wow. My goodness. And am I correct in saying that it did not work? The thing they were trying to prevent against, they could not prevent with this underground city.
It did not work. And in fact, they didn't build a fortress like in the forest. Well, the part of the forest is just sort of like between France and Belgium right there on that part of the border, because they considered the Ardennes like impenetrable, and like Hitler went through it in like 2 days.
The Germans just went right through it. Yeah.
Because they were fighting the last war.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was really depressing. It was fascinating, but anyway, how did I get on this tangent? I've been thinking a lot about how the 20th century kind of sucked.
Tell me more.
A lot of the conversations that you and I sort of follow online or in books is like, liberalism, is it working? Like, is it failing? And then I've been reading a lot of stuff lately about maybe we're having the wrong conversation about the wrong thing. Because I sort of ended up after sort of a couple weeks of, just reading various things, especially R.R. Reno's Return of the Strong Gods, about sort of the dangers of nationalism and how, the quote unquote post-war consensus is about replacing truth with meaning. So like nobody's too committed to anything. So nobody gets, nobody goes all fascist on everyone else.
Right.
And to a certain degree, you can sort of sympathize with that argument.
Oh, yeah.
But on the other hand, strong gods versus weak gods, which is what Reno talks about. That doesn't explain to me why Columbia undergraduates are pro-Hamas. So it doesn't work there, because you think to yourself, oh yeah, jihadis, that's strong gods. But it's like, what kind of gods do we mean? What do we really mean when we say that? And the Substack that I stumbled across, has this really odd title. It's called Abrahamic Metacritique, which is like, whoa.
Oh my.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I could read you a quote from it. He says, I use the term Abrahamic in an attempt to denote the shared moral grammar emerging from the Hebrew Bible and its venerable offshoots, a foundational substructure that underpins the way Jews, Christians, and Muslims apprehend truth, morality, and the very nature of human existence. To fast forward for a lot of stuff, the Arab radical is not an expression of authentic Islam. He is the heir to a disenchanted Europe, speaking in Quranic idioms, but dreaming, I love this phrase, but dreaming in revolutionary French, which is like a way better, the idea that Hamas and the students actually share the same intellectual tradition, and that's why they're on the same side, makes way more sense. It explains it.
Yes.
It's like, because they actually share the same ideas. Because another thread that ties into this is how, and I think, who talks about this? Douglas Murray does. On Democracies and Death Cults, Murray talks about how although you could argue this about Stalinist Russia, that they never really paid for their anti-Semitism because they were on the winning side, quote unquote, right? But Murray talks about how like there was no reckoning with anti-Semitism in the Middle East. Like the whole, like Hitler had a great ally in the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And how basically you can go, he's been there. I have never been to the Middle East myself, but he says like you go to any like train station in Egypt and you can find like Mein Kampf and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Like they never had any reckoning with like institutionalized, but like, let's make it clear, because we need to get specific here, because he's talking about 20th century nationalism kind of anti-Semitism, like this sort of like thing that motivated the Reich and now motivates things like Hamas. And it's like, the reason this Substack is so interesting is because he's drawing the way we would draw the same distinction you and I would draw between the Christianity of the Inquisition. He's drawing that same kind of difference between saying what Islam is really about and how it's now been, the politicization of it. He's saying that's not really Islam. In the same way, I think we would say forcing people to accept Christ is not really Catholicism.
Right.
Just because it happens doesn't, obviously that's going to have limited mileage if that's your experience.
Right. It's sort of like, what's the essence of the faith versus what are sort of the historical accidents of the faith? It's sort of, that happened and that was a part of it, but that's not its heart being expressed. Right. And I'm used to those arguments for Christianity because I'm a Christian, but it's interesting to hear one sort of with Islam. Yeah, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah,
that's sort of a sort of distancing from the radical, violent component of it. That is not just a kind of secularized Muslim, like a liberal Muslim attitude. You know what I mean? That's the only other way I've heard that explained away, in a sense. So it's interesting to hear a different explanation of that.
Right, and it's interesting because both the author of this Substack, whose name I should probably say on this podcast, his name is Hussein Abu Bakr Mansour, and he's an Egyptian-American analyst. He actually fled Egypt's Morsi regime. So they both say, like in their various, and this caught my eye, that like, oh, it's too much to hope for that we're going to have like a sort of, faith in the political as the political sort of stabilizer. It's like too much to hope for that we're going to go back. It's very easy to say, oh, it's a good thing that theocrats don't run the world, which is true. I would stipulate that. But Reno and Mansour are implying that, like, really what the problem is that we've turned away from what religion really is, which is the opposite of liberalism. It's opposite of humanism. It's saying God sets limits on human behavior, like in a nutshell. And so we spend all this time arguing about, is liberalism working, blah, blah, blah. Here are the problems with liberalism. And why did the 20th century suck so hard? Well, one possible argument you can find in this, in these threads that I've been sort of combing through, is because it was the century that killed God. Which doesn't mean we need to go back to a theocracy. Like, that's not the argument. But the argument is, where do human beings find meaning? And where does that meaning reach? How do humans know where they get to stop? And historically, the answer is because, I'm God, you're not. Like, which is roughly what Catherine of Siena came back with when she asked, God, like, explain this to me. And he's like, I'm God, you're not. In a nutshell, that's what she came back with. And it's like, that's pretty much what Job said too. The book of Job.
Right.
That was the end of that. It was like, well, what do you know about it? Were you there when I made the universe? What do you know?
Yes. But that it's so tricky because obviously I absolutely believe that ultimately the human individual has to do as Job did and sort of cover your mouth and say, I spoke of things I do not know. Like, sorry, I don't actually know, and kind of throw up your hands in humility and be like, I'm small, you're big, I don't. But when you put people together in communities and in large groups, and people have a different sense of what is God saying and where are God's boundaries, it becomes so complicated. I'm so in love with religious freedom and with the ability to have individual conscience have power in the face of sort of those overwhelming, political forces. And I don't know, how do you get that? How do you get freedom of conscience and freedom of faith and freedom of religion without liberalism?
It's the difference between the small scale and the large scale. Right? We did a very odd thing this Sunday today here in Karlsruhe. We went to hear Mass in Italian, which I speak and understand. And our German is not necessarily good enough to really understand the homily that well anyway. So we went to this church where they do Mass in Italian. And it was really interesting because the priest gave like what I would call a sermon. I mean, this homily was not a homily. It was like probably 30 so minutes long. It was, and it was, and it wasn't like, it was rambling. It was tangential. It was crazy. But a lot of it was about this idea that they were trying to in a modern way, this was like a Catholic community in exile because they're Italians who live here in Germany. And so it was very much about like, how do you maintain your identity? Like, how do you do these things? Like when you're surrounded by people who are different from you. And that's really amazing contrast because like the format of the Mass and all the liturgy stuff is of course identical, right? So it's a universal church. But it's completely local in the sense of not where you are, but also like what community you belong to, right? Because we've gone to Mass in German here as well. And that is a totally different flavor because they're not, right? So it's like you need the small and you need the big. Like the big, obviously, yeah, you're right. You want liberalism in the sense that you want people to have freedom to form these small communities. You want tolerance.
Yes.
But how do you get to the point where no one is willing to have a religious war or a national war? Well, I mean, the answer to that would seem to be that all of these communities know the limits and they don't, they don't go in for something like that. I don't know. It's not an easy question. It's like I think you could spend your life wondering about it because like, how do you feel? You need that small community, I think, to feel, to feel safe and to feel and to function. No man is an island. But at the same time, you also need those bigger things. Like you want to walk around in the town where you are and feel like the place is intelligible to yourself.
Right. So in some ways that must come down to that concept of subsidiarity of the different layers, from the individual and the family to the neighborhood, the community, the church, the city, the state, the nation, like all those layers. And they each kind of have to be able to function independently enough at their level, and only appeal higher if they really need it. But you have to have all those middling layers. And I think part of what's so disturbing about the way liberalism has gone of late is the destruction of a lot of those middle layers. So you just have like this big nation on top and then like the lonely individual on the bottom. And a lot of the middling structures are weaker. The church is weaker. Family systems are weaker. A sense of our town, is weaker. All those links are degraded.
Right. Because the lower you go, and this is how Reno would put it, he would say, meaning is not as bonding as truth. And so you apply that to what you're talking about. And it's like the lower you go, the more you need truth and the less meaning works. Like to try to get people to get along because everyone is the same in the bottom. Like imagine, like John Lennon's Imagine, like this idea that we're all the same. Maybe that works on a kind of global or national level. Like we can all have the same sort of lukewarm regard for our country, even though we're very different, like lukewarm patriotism, because obviously you don't want like super strong patriotism because that's like destructive and it leads to fascism or whatever, or nationalism, and they fight or whatever. But the lower you go in those levels of subsidiarity, the more you need truth. Like the more you need a real thing, a strong thing. It can't just be like a kumbaya imagined thing. It has to be these are our values. This is what we do and don't do thing.
So I have a question that I'm not sure I understand Reno's idea of truth versus meaning. I think of them as maybe a more kind of a Jordan Peterson way, as intimately connected. Like something's only really going to be meaningful if it's based in reality. Otherwise so I think of meaning as deeply truthful. I don't really think of them as being opposed. How does Reno oppose them?
Well, he's making this argument that the post-war consensus wants to turn away from anything that's too strongly held. Like whether it's
like a deep conviction. I would be a martyr for this truth.
Right.
Is what they're trying to get away from.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's shifting away from the body politic into the individual. Like you have to find your own fulfillment,
right,
rather than believe in something outside of yourself. But I mean, because you've always been a religious person. So it makes sense to you that meaning is based on truth. But to secular people, no, it doesn't. Like I understand very easily how those terms can be opposed. And it's really interesting to think about that, right? Because Harvard, which is like in the news all over the place because, it's sort of become like a synecdoche for all this whole discourse, right? In a way.
Yes.
Its motto is Veritas, truth. And they meant it. They meant it in the capital T way. Because all of these colleges, we talked about this before, the original university was a place to study, to study the revealed world. Like it was a religious idea. So truth, until I read Reno's book, I don't really think I understood when people would say, oh, we're here to find the truth. That's the goal of university. I'd be like, well, that doesn't make any sense because nobody agrees on the truth. But that's the thing. There used to be a shared understanding that there was something. And it's not just like, do you believe the Bible? It's not that simple. It's, who are we then? And how shall we live? It's this idea that, there is a place to get to that makes this whole thing, being among each other, continuing into the future, that makes it work. And the tradition of, which we could sort of, simplify to be monotheism is really like, as Mansour talks about, it's about humility. It's about these limits. And we've lost sight of that powerful idea. It's a mess, right? Because at the same time, we want freedom to pursue these communities of truth. Those communities, are only their mileage is going to vary depending on whether they can actually give people something that's true in a capital T way that actually facilitates the real things that people need, which is ways to confront loneliness and sickness and, the sufferings that are inevitable in the world. And identity politics, I think we have enough receipts that it doesn't work that way.
It seems like what you're saying, that maybe perhaps there's an analogy between truth and meaning in the way that Illich talked about sex and gender, right? Illich said there's this sort of objective truth of biological sex, and yet different cultures will have their own sort of vernacular and way of interpreting and working with the facts, and that's called gender. And there's like a variety of different ways that cultures would manage gender, right? So you're saying there's like, well, there's, sort of religiously speaking, there's a rock bottom truth that is true. And then different cultures are going to kind of riff on that in terms of meaning. Like there's going to be some variety that has to tolerate one another.
You need to operate in the local, but the idea is that local world has to be based on something that's transcendent. I think that's where, when Reno opposes truth and meaning, he's opposing transcendent truth to sort of like a non-transcendent, just do the thing, just live your life and be happy that it's, you're just there. The difference between transcendent identity and our notion of identity. I also like to think of it as a difference between the universal and the global. So like the universal would be that capital T, right? With like Catholicism is the universal church in the sense that it doesn't expect things that are you're not going to experience mass in the same way in every place, especially as a stranger, right?
Right.
One of the ways that you can see this highlighted is to take a contrast between queer and trans as like the antithesis of it, because it's global. Like the difference between something that's just spread everywhere, having the same discourse, like literally the same words. Like the word queer has just come into German from English.
It's like copy paste.
Yes.
Okay.
We're literally outside the Strasbourg train station, and there's like one of those ads that says like transphobia is against the law.
It's so clearly a transplant from America. It's not like it's not a homegrown thing coming up out of that soil. It's like an invasive species idea.
And it's the same everywhere. It's recognizable. Like we've been in 2 different cities and run across protests, like pro-Palestinian protests. It's the omnicause. Like it's everywhere, Antifa. Politics is global. So the difference between being something global versus something universal, where like so to impose that to like the truth, the capital T truth has this sort of transcendent value, but it's expressed everywhere sort of like organically differently, even in the same city, the same liturgy, but you have one community that's, German and one community that's Italian. And so they have their whole orientation towards where they live is different.
Yeah. And that's sort of it's like an incarnation, right? It's this transcendent truth that gets incarnated into a particular place in a particular time, rather than cookie cutter, copy paste kind of spreading of a sameness, that monoculture.
There's definitely a small world aspect to parish Catholicism, because especially, this is an age of religious decline. In both masses we went to here, if you took out everyone who's over 60, it would be like basically empty.
Really? Oh, yeah. A lot of gray heads. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So what's going to happen in 20 years? Unless something changes, none of these parishes are going to survive.
That's very different from America. Our parish has a lot of young people. Yeah.
America seems to be behind the sort of de-religionizing, trend line. It's like going down, but maybe not as fast, or maybe it started later, or there is data on this. Like we do have some facts on this, but I feel the contrast very markedly. Like I feel like there's a palpable difference between the small world, big truth versus the sort of like same ideas are everywhere because they've spread through, the meme machine of the internet.
Oh yeah.
It's like, why is there all this like communist propaganda in like one of the richest nations in the world that has like one of the most generous social safety nets? That makes no sense. It only makes sense because it's an identity. But anyway, tell me what you've been up to.
Well, this is definitely a transitional season for me, because just last Friday was my last day of homeschooling my kids. I've been doing it for 12 years.
Congratulations? Question mark?
Thank you. Yeah.
Bittersweet.
I have such ambivalent. It's very bittersweet. On the one hand, I feel very proud of all that we've done together. And I feel very grateful for all the time I've had with them. The more I think about what parenting is and how much, for better and for worse, for how much power we have to shape our children, to shape their moral intuitions, to the kinds of things that we feed their minds, that we give to their attention, the kinds of things we talk about, the way we spend our time. I feel incredibly grateful that our life circumstances were such, and my husband was such, the kind of man who was able to have the kind of work that enabled me to stay home and spend all of my time, teaching them and being with the kids and loving them, such that I know that makes it easier to, now I'm about to let my firstborn go. She's about to go off to college in the fall. It's easier to say goodbye to them and to have them go out from under my roof, knowing that when they were here, I gave them everything I had. And I know I messed up, and I know I have problems, and they'll enjoy talking with one another about it. I'm sure.
Hopefully out of earshot
together.
From you.
Hopefully out of earshot. That's right. Part of the benefit of having multiple children is that they can then process the oddness or the uniqueness of their childhood with one another and be like, can you believe mom and dad? Da, 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 da. I know they'll do that. But I'm glad I was able to give them my whole self, give them the best that I had. And if the Mother's Day card they gave me this year means anything, then it reflects that. It definitely made me cry.
That's wonderful.
They had very sweet things to say. So I feel glad to have given them what I've given them. And, with each of the kids, as we've transitioned them out from homeschooling into the classical Christian school here locally that they've gone to, it has always felt like it was just the right time. Maybe 6 months late, but it never felt bad. It always felt like, oh, good, for us and for each of the kids, as they transition in. So my youngest, my little guys are 12, and they'll start in 6th grade at the classical school in the fall. And so we had our last day together on Friday, and we read history together, and they did their science work, and they wrote their paragraph about the Boston Tea Party, and they did their various things. We just ended the year together, but it was great. I mean, we read Fahrenheit 451 together, To Kill a Mockingbird. We did Booker T. Washington's autobiography, and a lot of World War II books we read together, and it was so good. We did the Civil War, Ken Burns documentary series on the Civil War. Did you ever see that? Oh, so good. Yeah, we just had a wonderful time together. So it's strange to have, to go into the summer not having, lesson plans to prepare, not having to look for what books am I going to get next and what are we going to do. So, but I know they're going to have a great time at the new school. My older kids have loved it there. They've learned so much. And, speaking of that school, another thing that's kind of been big for me this whole year is that the seniors at that school, they have a whole class called Senior Thesis, where they have to research and write, a 15 to 30 page research paper. And then they have to do turn that into a 15 to 20 minute speech, and then get grilled by a panel of people and kind of defend their thesis in front of an audience. I wish I'd had something like that when I was a senior in high school. It would have been so helpful. So my daughter got to do that, and I got to help her in various ways. But I was also a senior thesis advisor for another student at the school. And I loved that. It was so wonderful to be able to help another young woman basically do what I love to do, which is read a lot of books, research things, and then write about it, and try to write persuasively and articulately about that. It was the funnest thing. I loved it. And she did a wonderful job. Her thesis was all about abortion, actually. So I ended up doing a lot of reading, kind of along with her, and trying to help her find good sources. And so it was interesting to spend so much time thinking about abortion, when that is something that, being raised in an evangelical household, I just sort of automatically had sort of run-of-the-mill pro-life views from my community. And I didn't really have any reason to question those or to think that deeply about them. It just felt very obvious, right? I never encountered anyone or heard anything or read anything that made me question the rightness and in a sense, the completeness of those ideas. In a way, holding those pro-life views, I held them in the same manner that I used to hold anti-evolutionary views, right? That they were obvious to my community, so there's no reason to question it. But after all the reading that I've done on abortion, I just became convinced that embryogenesis and those early weeks of pregnancy, they're so strange. They're incredibly mysterious. And I don't necessarily think that my pro-life beliefs that I used to hold were wrong, but they were definitely not informed. They were very incomplete. And I didn't realize, you don't know what you don't know. I've had a lot of my sort of assumptions exploded, including coming to a deeper understanding of what pregnancy itself is and how weird pregnancy is. One of the things that was questioned for me, there's this common metaphor that people use a lot for pregnancy called the container model, right? Where the woman is sort of this object, she's a container, and she holds another object inside of her, a baby, right? And when people say, oh, you've got a bun in the oven, right? That's the model. They're assuming, right? You're on the oven, and that little baby is the bun, and I'm cooking it, and then I'm going to take the bun out of the oven.
Right, that it was always separate from you from the beginning, which is of course.
Yeah, as if you just popped it in, and then you take it out, right? All you had to do was cook it, right? You're a an appliance.
You're an appliance. Basically. Yeah.
Right. There's this famous paper, we'll have to put in the show notes that the authors, I can't remember, but it's a fairly well-known one in circles of people who, read and write about abortion, where they argue for the legitimacy of the container model. And the analogy that they use is they say that, a baby inside of a woman is like a tub of yogurt inside the fridge. Like that's the analogy that they use. And they also describe giving birth as analogous to like a person getting out of a car. It's like, well, it's the same exact person from the inside to the outside. Just like open the car door, step out, there's a person. It's like there's no difference. You're just opening a door and getting out. And with all the sort of the scientific papers I've been reading, I just think those models are completely wrong. They completely misunderstand what pregnancy is. It's much more like an organic being growing an organ inside of your body. Like as if you like only had one lung and then grew another lung. Like it's like you're literally growing an organ inside of you, but it's a temporary organ. And which honestly, this is exactly what the placenta is. Like the placenta is an
organ. Yes.
It is a temporary organ, right? And so, and since growing the baby is a lot more like growing a placenta than it is like baking a bun in the oven. It's just that one of the organs you grow, the placenta and the baby, can eventually become a person, which is astounding. But it really is growing an organ. And one of the aspects of that I also found really fascinating is that like when a baby is born, vaginally, the mother's microbiome, like in her vagina, like changes shortly before the birth to like be just the right mix to like infuse into the baby as the baby is born. So it's like her vagina like gives the baby the microbiome that it needs to start growing its own. So like there's these, those symbiotic organisms, like the bacteria are literally gifted from the mother's body into the baby's body, and so babies born by C-section don't get it, right? They don't get that first awesome dose of bacteria like that they're supposed to get. It's just so interesting. And people talk a lot now about how, you're the sort of the microbiota in your gut and then your brain and the connection of your gut and your brain and all those things. It's like, oh my gosh, all that's happening, like that dynamic, the baby's going to get that from the mother through the birth canal. They're so intermingled. And there's also this phenomena called microchimerism, where like when the baby's in the mother, like they start like sharing DNA like between them. And like even if a woman like has a stillbirth or miscarries, she could be carrying her child's DNA in her body years and years and years later.
Oh, wow.
Like this mixing of the genetics is so strange. And so it just gives you this picture of the interconnectedness, the symbiosis of pregnancy is amazing. Like, and that container model is just, which sort of assumes the separateness and this distinctness and the sort of individualness is just incorrect. And to go on that sort of that individual idea, I mean, I also have just been struck by how early embryos are incredibly strange and also incredibly fragile. Like 50%, anywhere from 40 to 60% of all conceptions die in spontaneous abortions or early miscarriage because they never implant in the uterus. And that happens so early that most women don't even know it, right? They don't even realize that they were pregnant or that there was a conception. It's just missed. And a lot of those spontaneous abortions are because of cytogenic abnormalities, but not all of them. Sometimes it's like a health issue within the mother. That it doesn't work out. But what that means is that if sort of the assumptions that I grew up with in my pro-life evangelical community, that as soon as there's a conception, as soon as fertilization happens, you have a new human being, a new person, a new soul exists in the world, full-fledged human person or soul exists, then that means over half of all people die before they're 2 weeks old. And if you're a Christian, that means that heaven is crowded with people who never lived, who never saw the light of day, who never had a thought in their heads because they had never had a head. Like it's a really weird thought. Like it's a weird thought experiment for Christians.
That is.
It's not like proof of anything, but it's like if you just follow the logic of like, what does it mean to call an early conception a full human person who has never sinned, who's never done anything. They've never done anything moral, right? And so they're obviously innocent. I mean, that's always the language like, oh, it's an innocent human life. How can you kill an innocent human life? This is innocence. So at that point, they're if you can say they, right? It's a little disc. It's some dividing cells, right? There's no face, there's no brain, there's no limbs, there's no human looking body. And that little disc, like that same embryo, like it can divide in half and become two distinct people, twins, which I have, and like whatever that first embryo was before it split into two twins, that first embryo is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. It's not like it was one of my sons and then the other one just sort of appeared. It's like, no, that initial thing is gone. It's dead. I don't know. And then there's two distinct people. Right. So it wasn't one soul. I mean, I don't think the soul, you can't like double a soul.
No soul sharing.
I don't know. It's weird. Soul sharing. Or like, I don't know. But then like it even gets, this one is like, that's weird. But what's even weirder is like in IVF, there are women who've had two genetically distinct embryos put inside her body. And they, while still being alive, they fuse into one.
What?
And then she gets one baby with two sets of DNA from two different embryos. And you're like, what the hell is that? What does that mean?
Why did that?
You know what I mean? It's just,
why did that even?
How does that happen?
Well, why did somebody do that?
And nobody did it on purpose. It happened. Like the embryos got close to each other and then they merged, they fused. And so that person is like a genetic mosaic. They're two distinct, differently fertilized embryos.
You mean it was like
that
a
became
mix-up?
One person. Yeah.
Like they accidentally put in two embryos from two different couples.
No, I mean they're two. In a sense, think of them as being like fraternal twins.
Oh, okay.
Of the couple.
They're two like embryos from the same. Okay.
Yes.
But don't they always do that? They almost always put in multiples, but then okay. You're saying instead of trying to have a multiple pregnancy, what happened is they had one super chimeric, they fused.
No, I mean they put multiple embryos in her.
Right. But
and two of those
right
fused instead of being like twins or triplets or whatever. It's like they fused.
That I have never heard
one individual born from the weird union of two embryos. And so just, I know that like, I've criticized people before for like taking all kinds of weird edge cases to try to explain away a principle. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying that like when I encounter these weird things that happen in embryogenesis and that occur, it just makes I just feel the enormous gap between what me and probably most people think of when we think of a person. And then I think what embryos can do, what they're capable of, and what happens to them. And I go, I don't know any people who split in half and make two versions of themselves. I don't know any siblings who fuse and become one being. Right? Like, what is that? It's just, it's a complicating factor for me. And so I feel like I can still say I'm a pro-life person. I think the attitude of hospitality towards new life is the right attitude to have. It's a virtue to cultivate, to be generously hospitable. And I think we also just have to, in a sense, sort of have a bit of the hand waving and the covering my mouth of Job and say, whatever's going on in those early weeks and early months is not something that it doesn't fit our categories. When we want to use a category like person or like individual
or murder
or soul or murder, right? Like we want to use these words. We have clear-cut ideas of what they mean. They do not map onto what is going on in pregnancy, especially early pregnancy. They just don't map on. I don't think we have the right words. I don't think we have the right metaphors. It's strange. And so I'm just kind of like sitting in the strangeness of that. And I don't know that I necessarily have new opinions, but I've lost some old assurances and I've lost some old opinions. I don't quite know what will take their place, but it's strange.
Yes, that is fascinating. And it is very much, I mean, you sense not just the limitations of the metaphors being invoked there, but also the sort of poverty of the politicization of it. I mean, I have a lot more sympathy, I think, for a pronatalist argument than I used to, just because I didn't think that people, women growing up and having kids was at all at risk when I was young. I just thought that was like inevitable. And now it seems like people are not choosing that. So it doesn't, for me, it's not so much about, the tolerance of early termination as much as it's about, well, separate of the discussion of rights, if people aren't willing to have kids because they either fear for the future or don't want to sacrifice, well, we've got a problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously the pro-life side, I don't think they're going to make any progress saying that abortion is murder. I feel like there's a lot more ground to be gained saying taking a chance on having a child is an opportunity. I feel like that's, that's a lot more potentially convincing, especially since, I know women who had abortions when they were young and then went on to have children.
Right. I mean, 60% of all women who get abortions already have a child. And 30% of that subset has 2 or more kids. So, I mean, that was something that my thesis advisee came across, and I thought that was fascinating. So that you can't just draw some straight line or some description of, all women who get abortions are somehow anti-child or anti-maternal. It's like, no, very often what they're thinking is, I can barely take care of the child I already have. And that's the one I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about her. I'm thinking about him. I can't do this right now. And certainly there's a criticism to be made of, if you can't afford any more children, what kind of sexual choices are you making? That's certainly it's like, but still, like, sort of like when it's too late, when the pregnancy is already there and she's trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I think there's a sort of myth that women are just thinking about their own convenience, when actually a lot of women are taking it very seriously and thinking about their future, thinking about the children they already have, thinking about their resources, and they take the decision seriously. I think that was another thing that my advisee convinced me of, was how seriously women who choose abortion think about it beforehand. It's not like willy-nilly, like spontaneous, it's not like that. There's a real depth of seriousness. And for many of them, that comes without regrets. I think the pro-life movement also sort of assumes all women are secretly traumatized and all women are deeply regretful. Just wait long enough and they'll all break down and join our support group. A lot of women feel relief because they thought about it. They did their moral reasoning and they've sort of made peace with sort of the tragedy of it in a way that they're not, I don't know, like some women who get abortions when they feel ambivalent and they really wish they could keep it. That's very different.
Obviously that's going to have consequences.
Yeah. And women who feel coerced and abandoned and, they would much rather keep the baby, but that's a subset. But a lot of women feel more confident. And that surprised me too, in learning about that there are a lot of women who don't have regret, but that doesn't mean that they didn't feel deeply and think deeply and ponder about it. And again, that's just sort of a complicating factor to me, to be like, all right, there are people who are exercising their moral reasoning and they just ended up in a different place than I would. What do I do with that? That doesn't automatically put them, my younger self would have been like, well, that automatically puts them in that bad woman, bad mother, murderer category. And I don't think that anymore. Like, my categories were just wrong.
Interesting. So. It really does seem to, like, we're talking about like big truth, small world. And then on the very inside is the conscience, the individual, the thing that really does abide to a person of moral maturity to make peace with his or her own individual choices, even inside that small world. Like, there is no reason why. See, this is one of the things that gets me about progressive Christianity, especially in the context of the United States, how the idea that if, say, someone who's religious has an abortion, therefore they can't practice their religion that says you shouldn't have an abortion. Life is complicated, and you can still make a choice for yourself with more reasoning, and then without that separating you from the confession that says this is the rubric.
Right.
And I feel like that is the same challenge in a personal level as the challenge, because I cannot tell you how many podcasts I listen to where murdering all these babies is just dropped as a token expression of conservative bona fides or religious bona fides.
Right. If that's how you describe it, the murder of millions of innocents or something like that.
Right. We have this very, I think, unnuanced understanding of how individuality relates to community. Like I feel like if we're going to answer the questions of this century and how to make the 21st century perhaps not suck so hard as the 20th, we're obviously going to have some new ideas. And I think it's probably true that we're not going to go back to having what we had before the sort of revolutions of the 19th century. I think that's safe to say. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be something that reasserts in some way some sort of individual humility before, like, a very palpable sense of, these are the kind of associations I form and this is what it's based on. When you told me once that if you have an abortion as a Catholic, you can confess and be forgiven, I was like, because you see how politically that makes no sense.
Right.
Because the politics.
And the sort of pro-choice, pro-life divide, it'd be like, those are, no, those are two completely different camps of people, right? And never the twain shall meet.
And you have to sort of abrogate one. Like, the idea is that, like, if you belong to this community, you never do those things. Or if you do those things, you basically are saying you exit that community. And so we need this much more subtle kind of understanding of that, I think. I think that's sort of where my own kind of wanderings are going. The world makes so little sense in some ways right now, especially when you're not where you are, where you live. Like, when you're not in your own house, you're somewhere else. It's especially since I have all this time to read and just how one thing I've discovered is that you really need to read fiction. I mean, I know you know this because like you've read a lot of fiction more consistently. Like, I went through a long period, probably as much as 10 years, where I didn't read a single novel.
Really?
Not that, like, unless it was like when I was working on in graduate school. I didn't read novels for pleasure.
Yeah. Honestly, most of the novels I read are to my children. And I read them classic stuff, but that's what keeps me reading fiction, is reading aloud to them. Otherwise, I tend to be more like you. I'm like, well, I got big ideas to figure out. I got to read philosophy. I got to read history. Right. I got to read some political,
But there's
so much insight in the fiction,
and it comes through. It's filtered through your heart rather than your head.
Yeah,
I'm just rediscovering that in full force. Like,
what do you read? What fiction are you reading now?
So, in People Love Dead Jews, she did her PhD, I think probably her PhD in Hebrew languages, so Yiddish and Hebrew, and she just mentions in one piece, in one part of the book, her favorite novel of all time in Hebrew, which is called Mr. Mani. It's basically the story of 6 generations of this one man's family, told from the present day, from the 80s backwards. So it's like each chapter is like it's going back in the generations of this guy's family.
Oh, neat.
And it's done in this series of conversations where, at least I think I'm at like the 3rd conversation. So I've read 2 sections so far. And the conversations take place between these people, and you're given like the details of who they are and why they're talking. But like, you only get half the conversation. They're interlocuting, but you only have dialogue of one of the people in the conversation.
Really?
It's really
so like every other line is missing.
Yes.
Are you supposed to try to populate yourself?
I suppose you could if you were like more clever than some people. Like, I can't be bothered like with those kinds of things. I just sort of ride the rails because I'm impatient. Because I read fast, and in some places you could say I read too fast. Like, I should probably learn to chew slower. So it's a really interesting technique, but more than that, it's just, to read about an idea through a character, even if, the character is just sketched, like this person was born here, did this, that, just like the ideas that are presented, like they hit you in a different place. And you can just read places in the book where you're like, oh my God, that's exactly what this other author in this nonfiction book was saying. You can find them brought alive in that. You can see the same ideas, but it's like, it doesn't metabolize in the same way.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And in fiction, you can, when you get inside someone's head and inside someone's heart, and like it's like you're following along with their moral judgment or with their moral crisis. You feel it with them. That kind of vicarious moral exploration is so valuable. I'm right now it's kind of a weird bedtime story, but I'm reading The Red Badge of Courage to my to my twins as our bedtime story.
I never read that.
Oh, you haven't?
You should give me your homeschooling list so I could like re-educate myself.
Yeah.
I never read Watership Down. I never read.
You didn't?
No.
Okay, well that's on your list too, for sure. That's such a good one. But The Red Badge of Courage is following like a young man who volunteered to fight for the Union in the Civil War. And you're in his head as he's like anxiously wondering, like, am I in my first battle? Am I going to run away? Am I going to be a chicken? Am I a coward? You know, and he does run away in his first battle. He runs away and he ends up getting bashed on the head by some other Union soldier with the butt of his gun because he's being an idiot and he gets in the way. But now he has a wound, which is his badge of courage. And only him and this other guy know how he got the wound. It wasn't fighting the enemy. It was something stupid he did. But once he has the wound, then he starts to feel like he can fit in and he has something to show for himself. But he changes. He becomes braver as time goes on, and he becomes the flag bearer. And he does do the heroic things he wanted to do as a young man after his, humiliations and sort of. But it's so interesting to be inside the head of a teenager, who's so wrapped up in himself and he's so self-focused, it's a good one to read to 12-year-olds, it's good. It's a very rich psychology, but puts you back hundreds of years and a different person, a different place, a different time, different experiences that I would never have.
Maybe we should shift into our final section here and talk about how,
sure,
what we're going to do with Red Femmes. So we're going to rebrand.
We are.
Because I think we've done a good job reading some feminist texts, and we'll probably continue to do that. But
yeah,
we want to do more. We want our brand. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. We want our brand.
our brand.
We want our brand.
I'm working on my brand. Yes. I hate that language.
It's terrible. But
can we come up with different language for it?
We want to retitle this project. So we're going to call ourselves Orders of Magnitude.
Why are we going to call ourselves that?
Why are we going to call ourselves that? Well, not because it wasn't taken on Substack, because everything's taken on Substack.
Yeah.
I feel like we're living in interesting times. And apparently that whole, like, this is a Chinese proverb thing is kind of an urban legend. But
oh, really?
I looked it up the other day. But we are living in interesting times that require... Well, at least I can say personally for myself, definitely the way of doing things intellectually has not worked for me for the last 10 years. I have to basically quit the internet on some level. I want to return to reading to capture the joy and the deep attention that it gave me as a much younger person.
Yeah. That interior space you cultivated by reading.
Right. So Orders of Magnitude captures like the seriousness of the changes some of us, I think, feel. I mean, we're going into I sent you that article, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg saying like, most of your friends are going to be AI.
Oh yeah. Oh, nope.
The new digital divide will be an analog divide, right? It'll be who has real friends. And who has fake friends or friends.
Oh, man. Right.
So it's serious. Like, obviously the internet isn't, well, I can't say obviously, but it doesn't seem like the internet is going away. But can we do something to sort of attract, inspire people to make the change where the thoughts that are in their head are not just mediated by the screen in front of them?
So it's like we want to use the medium of the internet and of Substack to encourage people to not be so much on the internet.
Right.
And to maybe read less Substacks, but to read more books.
Read more books and share what why they feel about the book. I feel very strongly that most online conversation, even if it's entered into with the best of intentions, devolves into sort of noticeable discomfort about agreement and disagreement. And I think that's human. Why would the idea of having a profile on social media, but everyone who replies to you likes you, why would that be appealing if humans weren't the way they are? Like, you can almost see it coming from a good place. This idea that humans are so fragile that we really do need a community that loves us And if now all our communities are online, and obviously there's so much lack of love, because there's no nuance and there's no duty and there's none of those capital T truths and sort of regular, this person's having a baby, this person lost their husband, this person, there's none of that, right? So the logic there is to create something fake so that you don't feel bad. But of course, that doesn't solve the problem of having a community in real life. But so we need to reorder, right? Orders of magnitude. It also gives that little like religious kind of, right? Because I mean,
a religious order.
People do need to order themselves in the local. It's odd, right? It's that sort of tension between you need to look very far ahead to look to your neighbor and do the right thing. You need to look. It's that contrast between the huge, ineffable, transcendent and, who's making dinner, who's doing the dishes.
I think there's a way that the internet can pull people away from the immediate loving obligations that are right in front of them. And that question of what do you touch more, your phone or the people you love?
Ooh.
Who gets the most touch? Who gets your fingers? Do you stroke your phone more than you stroke your children's hair or, rub your husband's shoulders,
Yes.
Ask yourself what you're touching, right? Or a book, do you hold your phone more than you hold a book? But yeah, it really matters what our bodies do, and it matters how we talk to people.
Yeah, we're going to rebrand. Podcast will continue. We'll do posts. We're going to write a book.
We are writing a book this summer. We are working hard on it.
We're going to tumble all these words that don't seem to make sense anymore. I mean, Illich, when he was like, I can't even have this conversation about sex and gender because these words don't mean anything the way that they used to anymore.
The words have been ruined. Yeah.
So many more words like that are now popping up. Heterodox, orthodox is kind of confused. Liberal, illiberal is really confused.
Certainly the word friend has been ruined.
Oh.
Facebook ruined the word friend.
Also, religion has been ruined. Like, that's very confusing. So we got a lot of things to think seriously about, I think. I don't think we will lack for topics.
Yeah. We won't. Yeah, and I think some of the next few podcasts we'll do will to try to share the burden of reading. Each of us will kind of interview the other about a book only one of us has read. And so we'll have one well-informed person and one very curious person, and we'll put us together and we'll see what we come up with. So
it's good. It's a good experiment, especially while I am on a different continent.
That's right. Since it's hard for us to share books. I can't drop it off on your porch anymore.
You really can't. Who wants to go first in this book experiment? Because we are going to give our audience the chance to do the homework.
That's right. I suppose I can go first. My book's probably a little shorter than yours. The book is Disembodying Women by Barbara Duden, and she was a friend of Ivan Illich, which is how I found out about her. Kind of following the footnotes.
I'm telling you, I could seriously. I had a thought the other day that I could seriously just figure out what to read next by books mentioned in other books.
Yes.
You could probably read your whole life.
That's how I get a lot
of
my books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Just turn back to the end notes and in the bibliography and just pull them out. Yeah. It's fascinating. So I love Illich so much. So I'm happy to read anyone that he recommends. So yeah, but we'll put out a post, a homework post.
I guess that's your job.
So I guess it's my job.
But note to self, Jordan's got to work on hers for next time.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this interlude. I know we kind of rambled all over the place, but
we had an outline.
We are kind of all over the place,
but I ruined it. So
it's good to see you, George.
It's great to see you. But yeah, no, we're not going to do video quite this yet. But Acton and I are staring at each other, even though we're just recording the audio.
We are. That's right.
All right, I'm going to press stop, but don't hang up.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.